So the syntax part of the course is all about sentence structure. And we all know that words are the basic building blocks of sentences. So we have words, we have sentence level, but in between that we have phrases. So we need to delve into that a little bit in more detail and kind of figure out what is that intermediate level of the phrase in the middle. So syntax, we know, is the study of sentence structure. Have you ever thought about what a sentence is? Has anyone ever asked you what a sentence is? You're all pretty good at identifying sentences because you know where to put the capital and then where to put the period. Most of the time, right, you know where to put the period. I mean, occasionally, I guess you get marked off on an essay because you have a run-on sentence or a sentence fragment, but that doesn't happen a lot. So most of the time, you're really good at spotting sentences. But do you have ever thought about what it actually is? Sometimes students will say it's one complete thought, which I think is a good starting point, but maybe not the best definition because you could argue lots of things are one complete thought. You could say this haiku is my one complete thought on this topic, or this paragraph is my one complete thought, or even this essay is. So what we need is a more of a linguistic kind of definition or analysis. So a good way to think about sentence is that it is a structure of language that marks an entity, and that entity is involved in a particular event. And the entity and the event are important things because we can then break a sentence down into those two pieces, where the first mentioned entity in the sentence is the thing we call the subject of the sentence. The subject is the who or what the sentence is all about, and we'll talk a lot more about subjects later on. And then the event, the main event that the entity is involved with, is something we call the predicate. So within the sentence, we have groupings of words, words that are grouped together into these phrase chunks. So we need to delve into that idea of phrases as that intermediate level of a sentence. So this is the basic makeup of sentences where the whole thing, all those words together, are that one complete thought or the entity involved in an event. And the words themselves, the individual words themselves, get grouped together into phrases. And sometimes we have phrases embedded inside other phrases. So we'll take a look at that a little bit later in the course, actually. But for now, what actually is a phrase? So we're going to group one or more words together. Actually, it could just be one word by itself as the phrase, but typically we have more than one word. We group more than one word together, and we do that because together they have some kind of conceptual integrity, or there's some unity or cohesion about them, that all of those words together go together because they relate to a very specific concept. So yeah, they're just conceptually unified as to marking this concept. The minimum requirement for a phrase is just one word. And that word we call the head of the phrase. And even if there's more than just one word in the phrase, there's still always one word that's the most important word that we call the head of the phrase. All the other words that are in that phrase are there to support the head. Their purpose is to give us more information about the head of the phrase. So here are a couple of or three phrases, and I want you to take a look at them and try and think about which word in there could be the head. So in the persistent turtle, we have this concept that comes to mind. And what is the most important word there? Well, yeah, it's the turtle. You see how the and persistent enhance our understanding of the head turtle? The tells us there's a specific turtle. Persistent gives us a kind of a description of the turtle. But turtle is the most important word. We call it the head. How about just wrote her thesis? Now this one's a little trickier because there's a couple of different there's a phrase embedded inside the bigger phrase. But here what we're talking about is the writing of something. That's the most important word. So wrote here, the action, is the head. And then just says it was something that was completed just recently, and her thesis now completes our understanding of what she was writing. So those other words are there to support the head. How about justifiably proud? Well, you can see how the minimum requirement there is proud, because we could say I was proud. We don't have to have the justifiably there, but I couldn't drop the proud and have a grammatical structure. I couldn't say I was justifiably. Then you would be waiting for me to finish the phrase because justifiably is there to support the word that it comes right in front of, which is the adjective proud. So it's supporting proud by, enhancing our understanding of it. So here are a couple of sentences. And if you want to just pause the video, you might want to jot these two sentences down, because what I want you to do is write the sentences down and then put circles around the words that you feel go together, because together they have some conceptual unity or cohesion. And remember, you can have phrases inside other phrases. So you can have circles inside other circles. So just take a minute and write the sentences down and then circle all the words into little groups that you feel go together into what we call phrases. So I'm going to start with the first one. I imagine what just jumps right out at you as needing a circle around it is the students. The students is the phrase that marks the main entity involved in this event. That's the subject of the sentence. And then that means that the rest of the sentence, wrote their exam in the gym, is what we call the predicate of the sentence. And this is the basic structure. This is kind of the starting point for analyzing sentences. The starting point is to break it down into subject plus predicate. Then within the subject, we have to identify the head. And since the subject is an entity, then it's always going to be a noun phrase. And so the head will always be a noun. So students is the noun head, which means we're dealing with some kind of noun phrase. For predicates, the head will be the kind of action or event word. So what was going on? Oh, I forgot to talk about this. So yeah, the is this determiner. The purpose of the is to support the head. Now I know there are specifics. Okay, now moving on to the predicate. The head of the predicate is the verb wrote. The predicate is always a verb phrase because it's always an event. And how do we mark events? With verbs. So wrote is the head verb, meaning wrote their exam in the gym. That whole phrase together is a verb phrase that marks the event. But within the verb phrase, usually we have more going on than just a head verb. Usually we have other kinds of either entities or locations or different things going on in the predicate. So their exam, did you put a circle around their exam? Their exam is another noun phrase because exam is a head noun of this noun phrase. It's the thing that the students wrote, right? And this, if you have a noun phrase that comes directly after the main verb, this is typically what we call the direct object. It's the thing kind of directly impacted by the verb. So this is a very common structure for sentences in English to have the subject first, then you have the main verb in the predicate, followed by a direct object, the thing that gets impacted by the action of the verb. But we also have in the gym at the end. And in the gym is marking a location. And you may be thinking that the head of this is gym, because in the gym, the word that jumps out at you most is probably gym as being the most concrete kind of word in there. But in fact, gym is not the head of the phrase in the gym, because this is marking a location. And locations are spatial relationships that are marked by prepositions. So in here is the head of this preposition, the head of this preposition phrase. And within that preposition phrase, we have a smaller noun phrase. So gym, gym is the head, but it's the head of its own noun phrase. It's not the head of in the gym, it's only the head of the gym. So basically what we have here is they wrote their exam in the gym. Their exam gives the idea of what was written, and in the gym gives a sense of location. So they're all completing our understanding of the head. So here we wrote something somewhere. Something is how we identify the direct object. And if we have a somewhere expression, that will be expressed using a preposition phrase of location. We wrote something somewhere. We wrote their exam in the gym. So those are two separate phrases. Okay, let's move on to the next one. So if you haven't done so, pause the video and put circles around the different phrases within 10 happy people crawled into the secret tunnel. And we'll get started on that one. So again, I imagine the distinction between the subject and the predicate kind of jumps out at you. We're going to put a circle around 10 happy people. That's who or what the sentence is about. And then what did they do? What was the main event part? They crawled into the secret tunnel. Again, inside the predicate, we have a little bit more going on here, although we should first identify the head of the subject and the head of the predicate. So now we have people and crawled as the head of those two pieces. So the essence of this sentence really is people crawled, right? If you just have the head noun of the subject and the head verb of the predicate, you are kind of getting at the essence of the sentence. People crawled. But as before, there's a little bit more going on in the predicate. So next thing we should do is ask ourselves, is there a direct object? And we can identify the direct object if it answers the verb something question. So you identify the head verb and then ask yourself, do we verb something? Do the people crawl something? And in this case, they don't actually crawl something, right? Instead, what they do is they crawl somewhere. So here we have a situation where there's no direct object. You don't have to have a direct object. We don't crawl something. They crawled somewhere. So we have a location. And how do we mark locations? What kind of phrases do we use to mark locations? We use preposition phrases. So into is the head preposition of the preposition phrase into the secret tunnel. And the purpose of into the secret tunnel is to complete our understanding of the head crawled. Now we know the location or the destination of their crawling. Again, inside the preposition phrase, we have a smaller embedded noun phrase. So the secret tunnel is still an important piece, and tunnel is the head of that noun phrase that's integrated inside the preposition phrase. But it's not the head of the whole preposition phrase because that has to be a preposition. So that is the word into. So hopefully that gives you a good sense of kind of how we approach looking at a sentence. And it's really good if you can at least look at a sentence and make that division between subject and predicate, and then look for other pieces like a main verb and is there a direct object. And in fact, there's another screencast just about exactly that kind of identification of those constituents. So hopefully that was a good introduction, and you can carry on and learn some more about the other ones next. Bye.